Stephen Miller might be the most wild figure in Donald Trump's entire administration, which is really saying a lot considering the absolute sickos who occupy this White House. But that is also why I'm genuinely excited to dive into this story today. You might have noticed that Stephen Miller has been generally absent from the Trump administration lately. He's not really at the White House. You don't see him in the Oval Office. He's vanished from Fox News. It's been a literal month since he last appeared on air. So, where is Stephen Miller? Well, that is the reporting we are getting into today. We are going to get into it all, but before we do, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video, and if you haven't already and you enjoy our channel, to hit that subscribe button because it goes a long way in supporting our work. Now, he's been kicked out. He's been frozen out. He is no longer part of meetings, negotiations, or anything involving this administration's inner workings. And it is for a hilarious reason that is frankly pretty pathetic for his career. I want to get into all of it, but first, I want to point out where I started noticing the cracks. It was during the DHS hearing and the confirmation of Markwayne Mullin. The way he tried to separate himself and create some distance between himself and Stephen Miller was a massive red flag. It was the foreshadowing of what was to come. We are going to get into this article about how Stephen is officially on the outs and what that means going forward for an administration that is currently in the midst of a full-blown civil war.
Ask you about a statement that was made regarding the Preddy killing by Steve Miller in the White House. He said, quote, that Preddy was a domestic terrorist who, quote, tried to assassinate federal law enforcement. Don't you think it was irresponsible and reckless for Stephen Miller to post that claim on X without any evidence, just as you have retracted your statement?
Senator, I believe that question is better asked to Stephen Miller, not myself. I can't speak for him.
Well, Stephen Miller also said, again on Fox News, quote, under President Trump's leadership, we are looking to set a goal of a minimum of 3,000 arrests for ICE every day. If you're confirmed, are you going to be directing ICE to arrest 3,000 people a day?
Sir, once again, can't speak for Senator or for Stephen Miller, but I can say the President has tapped me to be the Secretary of Homeland, and I will lead that department, and I'll lead it.
So will you continue that arrest quota of 3,000 people a day?
No quota has been set for me, sir.
Well, in effect, it's a quota if the White House directs the DHS secretary
The
to
President of the United
3,000
States sets
people a
the
day.
policies, and I'll be working with the President. If you have a question for Stephen Miller, please
Well, I
ask
really
him.
regret that you are going to stick to those same policies and practices and condone the statements of the White House that are so demeaning to someone who was a victim of lawlessness and recklessness by an ICE officer.
Senator, I didn't say that.
Well, let me ask you then.
It wasn't exactly subtle, was it? Markwayne Mullin out there desperately trying to create some distance between himself and Stephen Miller. Basically saying, well, you're going to have to ask Stephen Miller about that. Or maybe take those questions to Stephen Miller. But the one that really stood out was him claiming, no, Stephen Miller doesn't give me instructions. That was the most telling moment for me. Obviously, Mullin realized it would be politically toxic to keep slandering people like Rene Good and Alex Spray. But for him to publicly state he's not following quotas, which, by the way, DHS isn't even trying to hit anymore, is significant. Now, let's be clear. ICE is still terrorizing communities. Let's not undersell that reality at all. But it's not happening in the same way we witnessed earlier in this administration. Later in this video, I want to discuss what their new focus actually is. But it's glaringly obvious that the role Stephen Miller once held, directing what was Donald Trump's #1 policy, mass deportations by any means necessary, including targeting American citizens and people who had committed zero crimes. That is simply not the policy anymore. Because of this shift, Miller, especially over the last couple of months and particularly since the events in Minneapolis, has been desperately trying to claw his way back into Donald Trump's good graces. But it hasn't worked. Just take a look at this post, which pretty much explains exactly why he's no longer allowed to speak or show his face anywhere. Stephen Miller made this wild and hypocritical post yesterday, writing on Twitter, "Be unapologetically pro-civilization," to which the Democrats rightfully responded with a couple of question marks and Donald Trump's post from April 7th. A whole civilization will die tonight, he wrote, never to be brought back again. Speaking about Iran and his war, that is only proving out how dementia-addled he is.
So, yeah, Stephen, I'm not really sure how pro civilization it is to constantly threaten to genocide an entire civilization, but you might want to check in with your boss about that logic. Honestly, that's pretty much all we've seen from Stephen Miller lately. And before we dive into this reporting, can we just talk about how absolutely ridiculous it is for these four intellectual right-wing dummies who clearly haven't picked up a book in their lives and have zero clue what Western values actually mean, to always be preaching about saving Western civilization? Apparently, their idea of saving civilization is giving all of our money to billionaires and forcing people who can't afford it to have children that the government refuses to help them raise. I mean, look at Gavin Newsom. He just moved forward with a plan to provide 400 free diapers to new parents in California, and the right wing is actually attacking him for it. These are the same people claiming they want to renew our civilization by forcing us to have kids we can't afford to support. It's just a side note, but the hypocrisy is staggering. Stephen Miller is a complete hypocrite, and he's constantly spewing garbage. But now it's finally coming back to bite him, because even Donald Trump doesn't want him around anymore.
Stephen Miller's humiliation revealed after he embarrassed Trump. Several former and current officials have said that the president is punishing his top immigration goon. Donald Trump is freezing out top advisor Stephen Miller after he devised one of the most glaring missteps of the president's second term. According to a bombshell new report, Miller, ostensibly the second-in-command to White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles, has been Trump's point man on immigration for a decade. During Trump's first term, he cooked up the idea to separate migrant children from their mothers at the US border. And in this term, he has pushed hard for 3,000 daily ICE arrests as well as inflaming dangerous rhetoric against protesters. Miller called Alex Spray, the 37-year-old who was shot dead by border agents in Minnesota in January, a domestic terrorist, putting Trump in a tough position. The 79-year-old did not adopt Miller's description of the protester, the second to die in January, a month that saw DHS assume a softer approach after severe pushback from critics from both sides of the political divide. Trump has since spoken out about Miller's propensity to sometimes go too far, according to a White House advisor who spoke to The Atlantic. So, throwing Miller under the bus, two DHS officials talking about recent funding negotiations said that it was Tom Homan and Markwayne Mullin who led the charge to secure funding for the department on Capitol Hill this year, sans Miller. Miller was involved last year, though not this year. Two others with inside knowledge said that while he still leads daily briefings regarding hands-on immigration matters, his tone has died down of late. So Stephen Miller is being silenced, Stephen Miller isn't speaking out, Stephen Miller isn't involved with the day-to-day administration, and he's being punished by Donald Trump.
Imagine being so repulsive, so disgusting, and so bigoted that even Donald Trump is forced to say, well, quite frankly, I just can't have you around me. This is becoming too much. It's not a good look. And that is exactly where Stephen Miller stands right now. Now look, Stephen Miller is a relatively young guy in the grand scheme of politics. I don't think this is how he envisioned his time in this administration ending, leaving the White House just to go work for some random lobbying firm in DC. Clearly, Stephen Miller sees himself as a long-term fixture in the Republican Party. His ambitions don't stop with Donald Trump. He wants to be a power player in the next Republican administration too. That's why you see all this reporting about him trying to play both sides, siding with JD Vance here or Marco Rubio there, trying to keep his cards in the game. But you can't expect that to happen when you've become such a toxic figure that even the MAGA inner circle won't touch you. According to reports, Miller wasn't allowed on CNN for the longest time, mostly because he'd just end up screaming at the hosts. But now, even Fox News isn't giving him airtime. Donald Trump hasn't wanted him out there. Trump hasn't wanted him speaking for the administration. And if you're Stephen Miller and the only thing you bring to the table are these toxic, bigoted, and deeply unpopular approaches to immigration, and you can't even get Donald Trump, the harshest figure on immigration in our lifetime, to back you, then what is your future in the GOP? What else does Stephen Miller actually offer besides bigotry and hate? That's it. That's the only club he has in his bag. If Miller is getting frozen out by Trump on the very issue of immigration, he has no future in this party or any future administration. And that's why it's especially critical right now to pay attention to what else the DHS is doing, which at this point, I don't think has much to do with Stephen Miller. It might have more to do with Markwayne Mullin.
considering he wouldn't answer questions about it. But the new target is the elections. That is Donald Trump's goal for what is essentially a standing army. Maybe all that extreme rhetoric around immigration was just a way to recruit the worst of the worst into ICE and DHS. To build a force that is loyal only to Trump. That's what it is. And now, he can deploy them however he wants, starting with the elections. That's exactly what Rachel Maddow is reporting on right here.
It was last August when a gunman who was all weirded out about COVID vaccines decided to shoot at the CDC in Atlanta. That gunman killed a police officer, broke 150 windows, and terrified the people who work at the CDC, sprayed glass shards all over CDC offices. Again, that was in August when that happened. Now the Associated Press is out with this headline, quote, 7 months later, the government still hasn't fixed CDC's shot up windows. Yeah, what counts as a sign that a part of the government is being abandoned, if not destroyed, by Donald Trump? Over at the CDC, they're not even replacing the windows there that are full of bullet holes. That seems like a sign. Also, have a look at the Federal Department of Education. The Trump administration can't legally shut it down without Congress allowing it to. But Congress has nevertheless gotten rid of basically half the people who work there and has shut down or farmed out its major programs. Now, Trump is forcing them to give up the building that has been the Department of Education's headquarters for decades. Just walking away from that building. The American public consistently says they do not want Trump to destroy the U.S. Department of Education, but he is destroying it anyway. And now, as of this week, its headquarters will be gone. That said, there's one federal agency that's just getting bigger and bigger under Donald Trump, and that, of course, is the sprawling, scandal-ridden Department of Homeland Security. Here's a heads up about that. There's been quite a bit of attention recently to the fact that the FBI and DOJ have been targeting elections administrators in multiple states, most infamously the FBI raid in Fulton County, Georgia's elections office in January, where they seized hundreds of thousands of ballots from the 2020 election. But here's something to keep an eye on, because we are now also seeing Homeland Security being used to target elections administration. And this is something worth keeping an eye on. A couple weeks after that Fulton County raid, the White House ordered HSI, which is part of the Department of Homeland Security, to start working on elections issues. Then The Atlantic was first to report that HSI was conducting an investigation into the 2020 elections in the state of Arizona. Now, just a few days ago, CBS has reported that Minnesota elections officials have received a grand jury subpoena for Minnesota voter records as part of an investigation being run in part by the Department of Homeland Security. CBS also reports that DOJ is close to finalizing a deal to hand over whatever voter data it manages to get from the states to the Department of Homeland Security. Who knows what they will do with it? But if President Trump is looking for ways to use muscle, to use force, to mess with the November elections, to undermine trust, to scare people away, or worse, then this might be the way he is doing it. It's not just the FBI they are using. It is not just weird Tulsi Gabbard lurking in the wings while the FBI is doing stuff. He is also using the Department of Homeland Security, his scandal-ridden, utterly incompetent, controversial, fear-inducing, flush with cash Department of everything and anything is being applied to the elections too.
This is absolutely terrifying, and it's something that needs to be talked about a lot more. We are certainly going to keep that conversation going on this show. Also, in the spirit of talking about elections, the gubernatorial race in California is really starting to heat up. And I want to highlight someone in that race, the only person, in fact, who has explicitly said they want to prosecute Stephen Miller, and that's Tommy Steyer. If I had a vote in California, Tommy Steyer is exactly who I'd be backing. I truly believe he's the guy who would make the best governor for the state. He's not just talking about booting ICE out of California, he's actually talking about prosecuting them and holding them accountable for their actions. That is exactly the kind of bold leadership we need right now. So if you are in California, where I happen to be right now, take a look at Tommy Steyer. He is exactly who we need as the next governor. We're going to continue to cover all of these stories as they develop. If you want to support this channel and the work we do, as always, please hit that subscribe button and leave a like on this video. And if you've stuck around with me until the very end,
Drop a blue heart in the comments so I know who's still in this fight. Keep on fighting, y'all. Don't let them silence you. And until next time, I'm Liam Prescott, and I'll see you in the next one.